Hey, I'm Ellecia, your non-monogamous relationship coach. Welcome to the podcast where my friends and I chat about our relationships, enthusiastic non-monogamy, polyamory, swinging, kink, and our lives. You'll get a candid peek into what makes it worth it to live life outside the box. And in case you're still wondering, nope, we're not monogamous.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of Nope, We're Not Monogamous, and I'm super excited about today's conversation. It promises to be nothing short of enlightening and transformative. Today we're joined by two extraordinary guests, Jessica Fern and David Cooley, whose journey through polyamory and their groundbreaking work in the field have inspired so many. Jessica, you might recognize this name, Jessica Fern, the author of Polysecure. She brought us a profound understanding of attachment theory in the context of non-monogamous relationships. And more recently, alongside her co-author and partner, David Cooley, they wrote Polywise, providing even more insights into the world of ethical non-monogamy, polyamory, consensual non-monogamy, non-monogamy. But this episode's more than just about books. It's about the stories, the experiences, the challenges, and the triumphs that lie behind the pages. It's about diving deep into the psyche of relationships, emotional intelligence, and navigating the intricate world of polyamory. So buckle up for a fascinating ride. You're going to enjoy this. I am sure of it. And real quick, before we dive in, I want to share something special with you. If you're enjoying the podcast and you want to be a more integral part of our community, why not consider becoming a member of the exclusive Patreon family for Nope, We're Not Monogamous at patreon.com/notmonogamous. By joining the Patreon community, you're not only keeping the show running, but you gain access to behind the scenes content, exclusive perks, and your support means the world to me. And it's what keeps the podcast going strong. Enjoy.
That's what we want. Amazing. Awesome. Okay. Jessica and David, welcome to Nope, We're Not Monogamous. I am
Awesome.
so.
Thank you.
Hi, you're welcome. I thank you. I'm so excited to chat with you guys. I've been a big fan of Jessica's work for a few years now. It was really cool. When I read Polysecure, I was like, it was so validating. I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been doing. Converting all this monogamous stuff to non-monogamy. And now reading Polywise, I'm like, yes, so good. I'm excited I've already started putting some of your restorative justice framework into action with some of my clients, which I'm very excited about. So anyways, welcome.
Cool.
That's great.
Yeah. I am really, really okay. So here's the deal. Nope, We're Not Monogamous is not an educational podcast. It's here's what I was doing. I was running into all of this information that was like, poly 101, non-monogamy 101. And I was like, yeah, but like, how did you figure that out? Like, I wanted to know what people were actually doing before they gave you the advice that was really good that they didn't necessarily follow themselves. And so I just love to chat with people about their experiences and their lives and how they come to be giving this great information and advice, right? So I would love to hear.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah. Thank you. I would just
You
love
can
to
put
hear.
the book away.
Yeah. It's like there's so much good information, but like, what'd you really do? Right?
Right.
So I would love to hear about your guys's what non-monogamy means to you, your relationship philosophies, what do you got going on?
Why don't you start, Jess?
Oh, okay. We're both pointing at each other.
Yeah.
As in, like, what do we have going on in this moment?
Yeah. Yeah. You give a little bit in your book. I love that you give a little bit of your relationship history. But yeah, like what, where are you at now and how'd you get there?
Yeah. Well, I'll answer that as us together, right? And it's been a 21-year journey being in each other's lives. Yeah. and we've taken many forms for each other. We met as classmates at a residential massage program. We had a little romantic thing initially, and then we were really good friends for a while, for several years. We then got married. We had a son. We opened up. We were polyamorous together. We got divorced. We lived apart. We now live together, and we are so right now in this iteration we live together. We are life partners, we're creative partners with this project, being co-authors. We kind of live in this house. We have a few acres, so we run a property together as well. Yeah, and it's a sweet spot. And we have, you know, from we would be like poly intimates, and each of us have partners that live outside of the house that, you know, we have relationships with, that we all have relationships with. So it's a pretty nice moment for us. And there's been a lot of ups and downs, not easy moments, you know, in between. Yeah.
Oh, that is, I love, this is so fascinating. You know, we're kind of told that like every relationships are kind of all or nothing, right? Like
Mhm.
that's what our culture is, like all or nothing. Like you can't be friends with your ex, or you can't be business partners, or you can't, or if you get back together, it's now forever. Like there's so, everything's so black and white. And I love this like flow you guys have had and that you're sharing.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think it's taken work for us to realize like why throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's a lot of beauty in our connection and our relationship and our compatibility. And just because some things don't work, why do we have to throw all of it out?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we started with a semi non-conventional approach. You know, even when we were talking about getting the possibility of being married, you know, a big part of that conversation was recognizing that there were elements of conventional marriage that didn't work for us, right? And so we were focused on a lot of things like gender equality and what does that mean? Like how do we deconstruct sort of some of the fixed gender roles that are typical? We also talked about the recognition that getting married for us wasn't necessarily a forever thing, and that felt good actually, right? That there, you know, some of that was my avoidance stuff for sure, but there was also a component I think that wisely knew that we would, and we I think we framed it this way in moments of we may grow to the point where being together in this marriage doesn't make sense anymore, and can that be okay and not seen as sort of a fatal thing
Or a failure
or a
of the
failure,
marriage.
right?
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So those elements were there from the beginning. I think we both had a lot of fortune to have been exposed to thoughts and ideas that have allowed us to have kind of a semi non-conventional approach. And that's become more and more non-conventional as we've gone on. But when we met, there was a lot of that possibility.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. I love that. My husband and I have been together 10 years and we've never been monogamous because we were both married previously, right? And went, well, that's not what we want to do again. And so this that the idea of like intentionally building a relationship that allows for growth and change and evolution is amazing.
Yeah. I think the way we're framing it makes it sound as if sort of we set ourselves up for this really smooth ride. And in some ways we did, but in other ways we definitely didn't. We hit a lot of walls that many conventional relationships or marriages do hit. And that really got exposed when we opened.
Yeah, yeah. What would you say was what were the biggest challenges when you opened up?
Yeah, I would say our kind of becoming face to face with some of the deeply rooted codependent patterns that we had never really seen as codependent or were framing as codependent. It was kind of just like, holy shit, we've been doing that. Wow. You know, and so there was two layers of that. Well, actually three major layers. One was, yeah, I've been dealing with a relatively severe form of autoimmunity since I was 19, right? And so I've had compromised health our whole relationship.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And you know, that's come and gone in different levels of intensity. And we had our son was born. He's now 8. right after he was born, which, you know, that's a gauntlet to go through. That's a total initiation for any relationship, right? You know, it's like the kind of, even if you are monogamous, to go through having your first child is just such a process that can rock the foundation of any relationship. But then, right as that was happening, I got really, really sick, like almost died kind of sick. And that really put just insane amounts of pressure on our relationship, you know, and on Jessica in particular. Yeah, on each of us for different reasons, obviously. And that took a toll. And so going through being new parents, me almost dying and having to figure that out really left some significant scars. And then those things never really got integrated and repaired. And then we opened, and then it was just like all that shit, you know, even things before our son and before that issue with my health all came out once we opened.
You know, I always tell people, like, treat yourself like a toddler. Like, have you eaten? Have you had enough food? Do you need
Totally.
cuddles? Right? But like sometimes life doesn't allow for that. Right? Like
Totally.
when you're not feeling well, you're grumpy. And then like you start layering things on top. Like a simplified
Totally.
way of saying that.
Absolutely. And we've been people that have always like taken on really big things, like multiple big challenges at once. I'm not sure why we've done that so consistently, but we've really done that a lot. It seems like our MO.
We can do
Yeah.
it.
I'll start graduate school. We'll move across the world. You know, like all these.
Deal. It's fine.
Huh.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I'm curious what is the question I'm asking you? What is emotional intelligence is the words that came to mind, right? Like how does that play a part in the evolution, the creation of your relationship as it moves, right? Like as it grows. How did or how do you build emotional intelligence to get to the point where you're reconciling all these things?
Mm.
If
Great
that makes
question.
sense. COVID brain.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's a great question, Jess. I feel like I've been talking a lot.
Yeah. I'm not sure I get the question though. Like I feel right, the emotional intelligence piece seems like, of course. I mean, how do we do any relationships without emotional intelligence? Right. And I think that's what I see in my relationships with my clients and their relationships. Like if the importance and significance of our emotional intelligence, right? It
Yeah.
matters, right? There's usually very little repair if there's low emotional intelligence. If there's low emotional intelligence, there's a lot of reactivity and defensiveness.
Well, I was
Yeah.
almost hearing, I want to see if this was part of the question. It's almost like what some of the origins of our own process around developing emotional intelligence.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I love what you said about with low emotional intelligence, it's hard to make repair. And that's where I think a lot of people get stuck, right? Is like, okay, these things happened. Well, let's say sorry and pretend and move on, right? Pretend they didn't
Yeah.
happen. Like how do you develop the ability to recognize what needs to be repaired and then repair it and then keep moving forward?
Yeah. I was someone who would like things would really pressure in relationship. Like I remember my first significant relationship in college, and it just like I was letting things build and build, all these things that were bothering me that he was doing that were dynamics, build and build and build and build and build. And then one day it just blew the top and I was done. And he didn't know any of those things that were building and building and building. So he had no opportunity to repair because by the time I hit my threshold, I was done. Right.
Yeah.
And that was a huge wake up for me, actually. I was like, wow. Right. Because my emotional intelligence was pretty low in that relationship where it was like, I didn't know how to communicate things that were bothering me. I didn't know how to speak up for the things that I was needing. And then by the time all of that came to the surface, there was no repairing it. Those patterns were too long, like it was too much. And then I could see for him, he was just shocked, right? He was like, whoa, what can't we fix these things? And it's like, they're not fixable. Like, right, I'm done, like I can't deal with this anymore. And so I really vowed to myself, first, I don't want to do this. I don't want to experience that. And I don't want to do this to someone else, right? To like break someone's heart in this way, where they thought like, we're good, we're in this amazing relationship, and I'm actually not happy at all. And so it was initially this very mechanical agreement I made. If I think of like if something bothers me once, okay, I can still keep it internally and I'll try to work with it. Like, is this really an issue? How can I see this differently? What can I maybe change? And if I think about it twice, maybe I'll speak it up. But if it happens a third time in my mind, I have to speak up about it. It was so simple and just like, that's the agreement, If I've thought about it 3 times, even if it seems petty and like silly, or like I'm worried that I'm too needy. So that's a big part of emotional intelligence too, is like our relationship with the inner critic, that says we're too much, we're not enough, and keeps us from being expressive in relationship.
Yes, that's brilliant. Because I have a lot of people will come and say, "Well, I'm trying to be cool. Like I don't want to make a big deal out of things. That's my problem. It's not their problem." Or I just, then just holding things in, and there's like this non-congruence, right? Like they think they're being chill and cool about things, but really internally they've got this struggle happening, and that energy is there.
Yeah, and I think
Exactly. Go
mm,
ahead, Dave.
well, yeah, I think there's something interesting about that. Like, why do people want to come off as chill? Why do people want to come off as quote unquote not needy? Like, this is so prevalent, and it's something that I see with clients across the board, recognize my own version of it. Is the way that we're socialized. A lot of what the work that Jess and I wanted to do with the book is to really kind of zoom out to some of the macro causes of why people have challenges in their relationships. What are the socialized influences that we bring to our individual relationships? And for me, there's this real disconnect between our lived experience, i.e., our feelings, needs, and wants, right? And the capacity to own those and communicate those in relationship. And for me, this is huge. It's massive how many people are struggling with this, and the stigma that exists around sort of naming your needs and wants in relationship, in the way that we're really quick either internally for ourselves to downplay those or dismiss those, or right that the partners are sort of giving us shit for it, right? And sort of treating our entreaties as problematic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's this idea that like if you're having any emotional reaction other than like joy or happiness, then you have to be justified in it, right? Like someone has to have harmed you in order to be upset. And so it's like we automatically look for, well, what did I'm having these big feelings. What did you do wrong? You're bad. You made me feel these, right? And even if we can like logically go, well, that's not really what happened, it's almost like we have to come up with this justification. And then you're
Mhm,
fighting.
mhm.
And then
Right.
you're in a fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So that feels like a big piece too of emotional intelligence is, are we on the drama triangle? Which is that model of a triangle facing down with the perpetrator, the rescuer on the top 2 points, and the victim on the bottom, right? And that's often how we conduct our relationships, where there's a good guy, there's a bad guy, there's right, there's wrong, there's this blame back and forth, or this enabling through rescuing. And so that would be a good, like, if you're on the drama triangle, often we all get on it,
Yeah.
even high emotional, but the emotional intelligence piece is, oh, can I catch that I'm on it? And do I have a way off it? Right? Can I
Mm,
communicate more about my feelings and needs?
Mhm.
Right? Or communicate in ways that aren't judging and blaming.
Yeah.
mm,
And I love that that question of, what is it that really spurs people on to develop emotional intelligence. And I would say, relational intelligence as well. I think those are two different things that both really serve each other. But what is it that allows people to want to develop those things? And I think that's one of the things that's really cool about non-monogamy is that I feel like it's really in part inspiration and in part by necessity. It's a process through relationally through which people are really pushed to develop emotional and relational intelligence. I think that's one of the coolest things about it for me is that it's an invitation. It's a very powerful invitation to grow at that level.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree. That's one of my favorite things is the necessity to keep growing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Amazing. Amazing. So I'm curious about what would you say are some of the best strategies or practices for nurturing that kind of growth in a relationship, in a person? I don't know.
Mhm. Jess, you want to start that one?
Sure. I think I'm trying to think just what's my own answer, right? Instead of the like academic type of answer. Yeah, for me, I mean, having the regular practice, it's not always a daily practice, but having regular practice of just stopping and tuning in. So sometimes that looks like journaling, sometimes that's meditation, sometimes that's whatever, but this intentional pausing to tune in and to like check in with my parts and ask what's going on here. Yeah, that feels like one of the most important things is sort of caring for the interior, basically.
Hmm. Yeah, for me, I think it's, so much of my process is revolves around conflict. It's the work that I'm doing with clients is I'm focused on how to teach people to approach and handle conflict differently. And so for me, conflict has really become central in terms of how to really cultivate intimacy. Like I really see it as one of the single best ways to develop deeper levels of intimacy. I think the deeper I go into exploring conflict and how to operate within its realm differently, I'm seeing like, wow, this is the single best way into levels of intimacy. I don't know if we can get any other way. And so I'm really curious about what helps us do intimacy well, excuse me, conflict well. Like what allows us to step in and lean into conflict instead of sort of away from it and see it as something threatening. And for me, it's really like what allows us to stay curious when we're triggered. Like for me, that's been this really big sort of divide line in terms of skill level. It's like what actually in the moment of trigger, feeling your nervous system be activated allows you to stay present and engage with the person with whom you're in that trigger dance. And for me, that's a really big thing. And so the things that allow me to do that or like curiosity to stay curious with someone that I feel triggered by is sort of recognizing, okay, what about my nervous system needs to get soothed or tended to, right? Sort of going back to that question of needs and wants. Like, what do I need? Which is really a self-awareness thing in the moment to stay feeling safe that I can give to myself. And often it's a really simple thing, kind of sort of what you were alluding to, Jess. It's just like tuning in and taking a breath and sort of calming my own sense of agitation or threat response. Like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm good. This is not a problem. This is uncomfortable. This sucks. This is bringing up a lot internally, but I'm actually good. And I'm really curious about what's going on for the other person here. And so doing that inner work to reduce my own threat response to sort of the situation at hand so that I'm able to stay engaged in a place of curiosity about what's happening for the other person instead of making assumptions or just attacking or shutting down completely has been really some of the most important work for me.
That's beautiful. I love that. And it totally does go back to what Jessica said and like checking in with your parts and noticing what's happening internally, which I think is a real like huge struggle for a lot of people is just to even know that their body has anything to say.
That's
Right?
right.
Adrenaline hits, I'm done.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I spent a very intensive period doing a lot of like EMDR therapy and like trigger work, like working on all of those reactive triggers. And I think that's what really created a shift in my whole life. But, obviously in my relationships where it's just, there wasn't as much defensiveness and reactivity and like flashbacks.
Yeah, totally. Totally. I love that. For me, it's breath work. Like
Mhm.
daily breath work keeps me like grounded, noticing what's happening, noticing, the little my hair standing up on the back of my neck. I can like start soothing before I've like gone over the cliff into fighting.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, you mentioned, kind of an interest in the restorative sort of framework that's introduced in the book. And for me, that was one of the biggest initiations was doing restorative justice work. And so sitting in restorative justice circles or conferences with people that are really, really charged. Often these are people are not, these are strangers. So they don't even have the incentive of being family necessarily, right? Or even friends. And the stakes can be very, very high in those circumstances. And so time after time, sitting in these tension filled circles, it was really a great opportunity for me to start really observing my own nervous system in response to other people's tension. Right. And in some of those circles, people erupt. Like I've had clients scream at my face, right? And it's like I have the clarity that it's not about me. They're activated because of what's happening in the space. But it's really this amazing opportunity to be like, okay, interesting. This is happening right now. What's my default sort of instinctual response? And how much power do I have to negotiate that and do something different that's potentially counterintuitive in this moment? So that really was a massive eye opener in terms of what's possible for regulation in a tension filled space. Right. It makes me think about martial artists or something. It's like you learn how to really deal with your body's instinctive fight or flight responses. One of my favorite quotes is from, I don't remember who said it, but I think it was somebody talking about Mike Tyson, right? It's like you can step into the ring with a plan, but all that goes to like what your plan looks like after you get punched in the face is a whole different game, right? It's just
Hmm.
like I love that idea, that image.
Yeah. Yeah. Now your nervous system is taking over. Instincts.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then extending that to our partners or the people we're in relationship with, right? Like remembering, it's easy to forget, like, oh, right, they have a nervous system, they have a threat response too, right? And that's getting activated. They have parts that are wounded, they have parts that are afraid, even if they look, pretty gnarly on the surface. So that feels like a relational intelligence piece as well of what's going on in the interior of my loved one that doesn't look very loving towards me right now.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that curiosity piece.
Yeah.
One of the things that you said, Jess, in another conversation we were having with someone else, that's really stuck with me is because I've been thinking about ways when introducing internal family systems to clients. People ask, well, how do you know when you're really in grounded or connected to your mature adult self versus really being blended with a part? And I think that's a really important thing that practitioners should be offering clients is like, what's your litmus test for knowing whether or not you're blended with a part or not? And I remember you saying, Jess, if you can be curious, then you've still got access. Then you're still connected to your mature adult self in that moment. I'm like, that's absolutely right. I think that is sort of the single best piece of reflection that someone could have to know whether or not they're really where they are in themselves in any given situation, especially a tension filled one.
Yeah, that's really
Mhm.
good. That's really good. Fantastic. Um, okay, there's all these things that have happened, right? Life things. How was it writing a book together?
Hmm. That's a great question. I don't know if it's like, giving birth or off like my birth that I gave to my son. The birth that I had was extremely painful, but then because of all of the oxytocin, like you forget afterwards,
Yep.
right? Like it's conceptually, I couldn't remember how painful it was. So I don't know if there's any of that happening like after the fact, but I do think overall it was fun. Of course, there's moments where it's just hard to like, there's deadlines and all of that kind of stuff. But I think we really enjoyed the creative and intellectual process of fleshing out and, unpacking things together. And we have a good groove of like what our strengths are. So usually like I'm writing ahead and then Dave's coming in and maybe refining or editing or adding. Yeah. And then for his chapter, it had to flip, which that was different.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's one of the places where we have kind of a strong connection, like kind of one of the places where our connection has really stayed sort of the way it's always been. Is just we love to stimulate each other intellectually, right? And so there's a way in which just talking on a daily basis is very fulfilling. And so to be able to do that on paper is a lot of fun, in terms of the exchange of ideas. And I think we've gotten to a really good place where it just feels easy to lean into each other's advice or critiques. I remember we have done projects in the past, writing projects, and there was sort of some starts and fits and bumping of egos, not so much, but to a certain degree. Whereas with this book, it feels like we've gotten to a really cool place. And I just never felt that. I never felt like we were ever tussling over anything. I remember some, moments where we were having to debate whether or not something that's been written needs to get cut or augmented or changed. And it just felt, there's so much trust for Jessica's sensibility creatively and intellectually. It's just like, yeah, okay, true that. Like the way that you're explaining that and contextualizing that makes sense. Okay, yeah, let's cut it. Instead of feeling like, no, that's my baby. I think it probably also helps that you wrote an incredibly successful book on your own already. So there's definitely credence to give. But I think in general, even if that wasn't the case, I think, just trusting each other's sensibility creatively is really huge.
Yes, I think it would be more minor things. Like there's certain words that I overuse or Dave overuses, and it drives the other one crazy to see that word one more freaking time, like really? Yeah, so just it would be more funny stuff like that. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. It's so fun to listen to. I skimmed through the PDF, and I was telling Dave before we hit record, I skimmed over the PDF and now I'm listening to the audiobook, and I just love hearing the like here's Jessica Fern's voice, who I've been listening to for a couple of years, right? And then, hi, it's David here. And he pops in with his very vulnerable moments that I so appreciate. Like going back and going, okay, I can look back now and go, here's what happened. And now I can look at it and go, oh, I see. I love that because I want everyone to read it, because I'm like, look, I can see my clients and I can see my partners in so many of these things. I'm like, oh, look, this guy did this. And like, they look back and go, this is what I should have done. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was really intentional for a lot of reasons. But I think, there was the sense that, not that all of these things that we mentioned, these dynamics couldn't happen to anybody, but I think there was sort of a sense that, like, in terms of therapy, in terms of process work, there is, I think, a disproportionate amount of women coming to the work and really being the initiators in relationship. And we really wanted to set an example for men to lean in, right? And really see a masculine voice taking accountability and acknowledging some of these things that can be really hard to do, this level of vulnerability that I think is hard for a lot of men. for a lot of reasons, particularly the socialization of what it means to be a man or masculine these days. And so it felt important to do that, and to make my kind of, I become the fall guy in some ways. But I think it was important to do, and it's authentic in terms of, the stories that we're recounting.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
I
I
think
love
that
it.
was maybe something we didn't maybe think about beforehand, but there were moments in writing the book where, because we were telling our story, and even though it was maybe a story that we knew, it's so different to write it out.
Hmm.
And moments where I think we both got even more healing about our past than I maybe didn't even think, oh, I need this. But in the process of us writing or then talking through, or there might have been one or two moments where we're like, I don't think it happened that way. And we had to hash it out and realize what is the coherent narrative here, that there was a deeper healing around our past too. That was
Yeah.
unexpected. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I had several male clients recently say to me, after listening to the book or reading the book, especially in the last chapter, there's a very open and descriptive expose on just the challenges that I faced, like how hard some of the moments became for me and how low it got for me, kind of my dark night of the soul with opening the relationship. And they're like, them talking about feeling seen in a way that was so healing was really validating for me, and really moving. And I remember, on working on that piece, like I was crying, like while writing that, like openly weeping, reliving some of that. And it was so good. I was actually surprised by that, and have never had that experience in writing something. Usually it's a much more cerebral experience. And so there was something sort of very healing for me to be able to connect that much somatic and emotional experience into writing. And so I love that. I really feel grateful for that.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
beautiful. That's exactly what it that's the idea that I got from it, right? Was like, oh, here's this vulnerability piece that isn't like, oh, look at me, look at all the work I did, but just like, this is what happened and this is how I felt.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Like like it's just really vulnerable and it's just so real. I love it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's my listeners, you must go read the book. It makes all our work easier.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah. And I like that about this book is, we kind of go back and forth of story, more personal story, or even little mini anecdotes in the beginning of a chapter to, theory and all of that stuff and practice. So yeah, I like that it has more of the narrative piece in there.
Mhm.
Totally. Totally. I love that. Okay, I have a question for you that I ask everyone that comes on. Uh Polyamory or non-monogamy, is this an identity or a relationship choice? Are we born
Mm.
polyamorous or monogamous, or do we choose it?
You want me to answer, or you, Dave?
You kind of got the lockdown on your model, so go for
Yeah,
it.
I say both. And what I see is that some people, it's absolutely their orientation. Well, it can be an identity, whether it's a choice or you're born with it. So I think many people take it on as their identity, or claim it as their identity. And then they might feel, though, that it's a choice, or that it's more of their orientation. And yeah, what I see is that it's both. It's not one or the other. Is that many people truly feel this to be how they're oriented, and there's a lot of negative consequences to not living out that orientation. Same thing on the other end of the spectrum, people feel more wired for monogamy, and that feels like an orientation to them. And I think it's important that we allow that, right? That's valid. And then for many people, it's a choice that they can go in and out of. They choose sometimes, they don't choose other times, or they wouldn't have chosen at all unless it was only because their partner wanted to open up or their partner felt that they were orientation. And then they step into it as a lifestyle and they're like, okay, I can do this, even if it's not easy sometimes. Yeah, but I think this has its larger roots, this question, in sort of this debate that our identities aren't valid unless they are not a choice.
Mm.
And it's like, why is that the case? Right? Like, why can't my identity be completely valid and even legally valid, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's choice, right? Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Especially since a lot of us identify with our careers
right.
that are
Yeah.
choices.
Right.
Right. And in so many ways, I think actually identity is a choice. It's
Mm.
just it's often we
Yeah.
don't realize that, and so much of human life is set by default,
Mhm.
just by where we're born, the particular circumstances into which we're born. And yet that doesn't mean then that you are not continuing to choose that identity for yourself. We inherit it, the structure, the infrastructure of the identity from where we're from, but then that at some point there is the opportunity to change all that. I think one of the most fascinating things about this question for me is even along this spectrum that we're naming, you can change. A
Yeah.
person who was identifying as I am poly by orientation can switch. I've seen it, right? For years, they're like, this is my reality. I was born this way. And then that's changed. And then on the other side, I've seen the other flip where someone was like drug kicking and screaming into polyamory because of a partner. And then now they're like, this is who I am. It could not be another way.
Mhm. 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 Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Totally relatable because I spent, most of my life monogamous, but fine, right? But like I could never go back now, ever.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess unless I just didn't have the spoons to deal with multiple people. Right? But I think I would
Mhm.
still identify as polyamorous.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what's so interesting about behaviors versus identity, right? Because, like, yeah, I identify as polyamorous, but sometimes I might only have one partner. That
Uh-huh.
doesn't not make me polyamorous, right?
Yeah.
Or many people identify as monogamous and they're cheating all over the place. They're far from monogamous, right? I mean, statistically, that's what we would say is most people espouse monogamy and don't actually practice it, right? Or many people say that they're straight and their behaviors are far from straight behaviors, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That is so real.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's our actual behaviors? What is our actual lived experience? And then how do we identify and how, congruent or not are those things?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Mhm. Oh, I love that. That's fantastic. Amazing. Um what is one thing that anyone can do for free to have healthier or better relationships?
Mm, that's a good
My
question.
first, I was thinking of you saying breath work. I was like, just breathe.
Uh-huh.
Breathe and pause. Slow down. Everyone can do that for free. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
so good.
Mm.
Yeah, I would say really looking at the origins of your conflict templates. What are
Mm.
what have you learned? What have you internalized about conflict from where you come from? Like based on what you saw growing up, what is your template and how does that predispose you to make conflict better or worse?
Mm.
Mhm. The thing that comes to mind for me when you say that is I wonder how much people are aware that conflict can happen other ways,
Mhm.
Mhm.
Exactly.
right? Yeah. Like that's not the only way to fight.
Right. One of my favorite thinkers is a guy named George Lakoff, and he was like, he was a, I mean, he still is. He's a political writer, and he talks about the power of frames to really determine. He was a linguistic specialist in particular, but he used that in the context of politics and helping people understand the ways that metaphors and language are used to really control sort of the movement of public decision. And so one of the things that I really loved was the ways in which he helped people understand that the metaphors that they're using to describe a situation are really setting a template by which action then sort of naturally flows as a consequence. And by extension, one of the things that I do with clients is really try to get people to understand that there's a literal nervous system consequence of the metaphors that you use. And so if we think of something as a battle and we start using a battle or a fight conflict sort of metaphor for what's happening, your nervous system is going to respond and set itself up for that kind of experience. Right. And so it was interesting to think about sort of, and he was sort of comparing sort of classic definitions or ways of thinking about life, like in the West versus the East, right? And I'm using those terms very, very generally, but East and West. But in the West, there's like, we love combat narratives, right? Everything's hard, everything's a challenge, everything you're fighting against, right? The hero's journey, you're conquering some evil, right? There's that good and evil binary that really is embedded in so much of our mythology in the West. And so he was talking about older societies like India, where they sort of move beyond that kind of binary in terms of good and bad. And there's more, you hear people talking about life as a dance. And just thinking about, like, what does that feel like to think about life as a battle versus a dance? What does it mean to show up to a battle versus a dance? And how does your nervous system literally, what's your somatic experience in relationship to those metaphors? And so I think, yeah, that's why I like to say conflict is an invitation. It's not a battle, it's an invitation to
Wow.
deeper intimacy.
That is so good. I use a lot of metaphors, and it never occurred to me that the metaphors you use set up the reaction your nervous system is going to have. Yesterday, I had a client ask me, "What's the recipe? How do I how do I do this?" Right? I'm like,
Right.
"Well, okay, like it's not baking. It's not a science. It's not, it's not chemical reactions where you have to have the exact ingredients. It's more like making stone soup, where all the partners bring whatever they have on hand and y'all throw it in a pot and see what you get. And then somebody maybe adds some salt and some, you get a little coaching or therapy, and that's a little basil. Like, you just kind of see what you need after you throw everything in the pot. But the cooking metaphor feels really nice.
Totally. I love that. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's fun.
We use the cooking metaphor too.
Yeah. I'm always trying
Mhm.
to find metaphors, because it's like, how do you just make everything accessible and understandable in a way that, like, you don't feel like you're reading a textbook, or it like makes sense in like my everyday life, because so much of what people are doing, especially moving from a monogamous paradigm to a non-monogamous paradigm, is like just makes your brain kind of boil, like trying to figure out a math equation, like what am I doing, what am I supposed to do, what's the right answer.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Mhm.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to share with listeners or with me?
Mm. No one's ever asked that. One of
I know.
these.
We're still just like, so many things. And no, we're good. This is great.
Yeah, I think my default is always questions. Like, what I would default to is start asking you questions, kind of
Uh-huh.
like I'm curious about your experience and your exploration of this. And
Oh, that's fun.
mhm.
I love that. I love conversations. Uh, Wait, was that a question?
Well, I think it's sort of, yeah, it's potentially the question. It's like the prelude to a question, I guess. Yeah, I mean, For you, I'm curious to know what's been one of the biggest challenges for you in your non-monogamous journey.
Jealousy. Fuck, jealousy.
Mm.
um,
And how do you
you
work with it?
yeah, I love that. So I like I said, I was married monogamously for 13 years. Very, very romantic, very big, lots of like possessiveness and your mine just way of being in love, right? And then when I got divorced, I was like, well, I'm really horny and really slutty. And so I want to have sex with lots of people. I guess I'll just go do that and be honest, because that seems like the right thing to do. I didn't know anyone who was ethically non monogamous. That just wasn't a thing. Um,
Mhm.
and then a few months later, I met my second husband and fell in love. And he was like, "You're the one," and I was like, "No, I'm not." He's like, "No, no, no. Also, I'm polyamorous. I'm dating this couple. I have this long term partner." And I was like, "Wait, what? Hmm. How do I do this?" So I was like, "Here's what I wanted, right? To go and be free and have autonomy and adventure, but also I knew that I was very jealous and possessive, and like those traits didn't serve me in any positive way. So I knew I was going to have to tackle those. So there was like this real struggle between like, here's what I want. I can see where I want to be, like the other side of that river. And yet here I am, like constantly falling in the water, trying to step across with jealousy. And so it took a lot of, you know, uh, healing attachment wounds, healing past relationship wounds, um, lots of breath work, lots of masturbation, self-love. And just really, I think the most important thing for me was holding on to the North Star, like my vision, like what it was that I wanted, where it was I wanted to be, even though my body was like, no, you're dying and everybody is out to get you and nobody loves you and everybody hates you. It was like, but I know that it's possible to get there. So I'm just gonna keep doing, just gonna keep journaling and keep doing breath work and keep loving myself. And it took a couple of years, and we were very actively non-monogamous along the way, but like I have a couple of blog posts where I talk about how I cried every day for a year, literally, because it was really hard, but also so worth it. So yeah, jealousy. Short answer.
Mm. What was that North Star? Can you define what that was that you were holding on to?
It was it was a little bit ethereal because it wasn't an exact desire, but it was uh, the opposite of what I had had before. Right? Like it was
Mm.
autonomy and freedom and it's so easy to fall into like really codependent patterns and lots of people pleasing and lots of abandoning my own needs and my own desires and like just tripping over my own boundaries and like, basically not having any for love. And so it was really,
Right.
really important to me to maintain my my own desires and autonomy and sense of self in
Mm.
relationships. So
So
that
was
was my
that
North
like,
Star.
so it's almost like tell me if this is right for your
Yeah.
lived experience. I'm so curious. I love this. For you, that like this is what I want for myself. And so for me to be able to get this in the context of polyamory, I have to be able to allow this.
Yep.
And so in order to allow this, I have to endure this because
Yep.
I want this.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that is exactly, and actually that's funny that you say that because I started out like I'm not polyamorous. Like I'm so in love with my husband, but like not anybody else. And I still want to have sex with other people. And he's very I now identify as polyamorous. But at the time, the first few years, I was like, nah, I don't think that's real. I can't fall in love with multiple people. Um, but he was very
Mm.
polyamorous. He was, I mean, I went through him going through NRE multiple times, him going through breakups, like all of that. And I was just like, oh, that seems like too much until a- and so like I wouldn't go and like date. I would have sex with people, but I didn't have like emotional dating with people because I couldn't I didn't feel like I had the energetic output or the energy available to me to manage my emotions around what he was doing, around feeling jealous and insecure, and also manage my feelings of like guilt and am I doing something wrong or am I not being loving if I'm going out and falling in love with people, right? Like I couldn't do both of those at the same time. I had to deal with one at a time. And so it was probably 4 years that we had been together and open, 5 years, 6 years, before I actually like went and fell in love and had another relationship. And then he was on the
Mm.
other side now dealing with something new for him of me being polyamorous fully in what I was actually doing rather than just in name. Uh, so so yeah, it was very much like, here's what I want. I have to figure out how to be okay with you having it so that I can then have it. Yeah. Fun ride.
I think there's a wisdom in that. There's like law of polyamorous physics or something. I see this a lot where it's staggered, you know?
Yeah.
And there's something that allows, yeah, your nervous systems to pace and actually stay in it when it is staggered like this, yeah,
Yeah.
versus everything crumbling because it's all happening at once.
The analogy that I used when I started dating, and then he was having big feelings, which weren't the same, they weren't the same as the feelings I was having, but they were big feelings, was being a rock in the center of a river. Right? I was like, okay, here's where I'm at. Here, this is within our agreements. This is, like we're good here, but I'm gonna stay right here and let you have your feelings. His feelings being this raging river all around me, working their way through. And I was like, I'm just gonna stay right here until it calms down before I make any moves or changes or go and do something else. Right? It was like, I'm a rock. We've agreed that everything here is good, and you're having all of your feelings, and I'd let him work those out before I moved on to the next. Okay, now I'm going on another date or any progression of a relationship, right? It was like, okay, let's work this out first. Let you have your feelings because I know how they feel.
Do you feel like, I was gonna say, did you feel like you were able to do that because of kind of the initiation around your own process with jealousy?
Yeah. Yeah. And prior, I would have gone, oh, you're having big feelings. I'll stop doing what I'm doing. I don't ever want to cause you bad feelings. But
Mm.
because I went through it, I was like, okay, I know you're having big feelings, and I'm going to give you lots of time to integrate, to settle back, to feel like we're good, right? Because that's what I had needed, was time to integrate, time to feel calm again. Um, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. I mean, that's something that what you're describing with um, that rock image is really something that I'm wanting to teach clients, right? Which is, again, and I love that sort of end piece that you added on to it. Like previously, without the experience of going through your own work, you would have just, okay, you're hurt. This is hurting you. I'm out, right? It's kind of the two extremes that I see is like people either do that, they cave in and like my needs, I just negate them and let them go so you don't
Mhm.
hurt. Or they're like, sorry, I'm good, I'm doing me. And you're just gonna have to kind of figure this out as we get dragged through the mud together, right? Versus integration. What you're talking about is integration. And that's one of my favorite words around, these kinds of experiences with new partners is, can we slow down, let our partners feel what they need to feel, have what they need to have, and integrate, and how, just that facilitates moving forward in a different way.
Yeah, yeah. And do that while like also experiencing NRE and like trying not to feel resentful that you aren't moving as fast as maybe your partner did before, right? Like there's so many pieces. And I was able to go, but I
Totally.
know that on the other side of this, it's worth moving slow. It's worth maintaining stability. And if I am experiencing NRE with someone who can't tolerate me moving slowly, then we're not compatible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I love it. Yeah, I'm so appreciating you sharing this much of your process. It's really satisfying.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I think, and that's what maybe we could have learned if we were to ever do some, like, redo something from the past, or what I want so many of my clients to see is like, if you go slower and integrate, like the story you're sharing, it's like you actually can build out to hold so much more and get exactly where you want to, right? But with all of this strength, it just won't be as freaking fast, right?
Mhm.
But it will be solid,
Yeah.
and it will be there. And how much relationship destruction happens from going too fast.
Mhm.
hmm
Mhm.
Especially when there's that sense, kind of like you named, like when there's sort of imbalances from the past, like, oh, it's time for you to feel, I was hurt this way previously, it's your turn now to go through this.
Yeah,
Right.
And
right.
and it's understandable from one level. It's actually like, yeah, there's some justice in that, but what's the goal? And it's
Exactly.
like we have to like recalibrate then, what is the goal? And so that's why I was really asking you about, what's that North Star? What's the goal? And that clarity, I think, is really powerful.
Mhm. Mhm.
hmm
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. It's so good. It's like moving slowly allows you to expand your capacity for holding all the things, for being compassionate for your partner, for holding up multiple relationships, or it just expands your capacity also for like your nervous system, right? So that conflict doesn't feel as fighty. Yeah.
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 Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm glad you asked.
Yes.
Ah, amazing. I again, like I said, I adore your book, both books and the workbook. I recommend you constantly. I would say it's actually funny. My assistant was like, "Tell Jessica that her book Polysecure is the number one recommended book on your podcast. You mention it in almost every
Oh,
episode."
thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, so I've been really excited for this, and I am loving Polywise. It's so good.
Mhm.
Good.
So good.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Um if people want to find you, how can they find you?
They can find me at restorativerelationship.com. That's my website. hmm
And same, they can find me at jessicafern.com, my website.
Beautiful.
And I'm
And
occasionally on Instagram.
sometimes I go over there.
Sometimes I look.
Right. I'll put those in the show notes. I appreciate the heck out of you guys. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
for having us. It's great to meet you.
You
Yeah.
too.